Sawubona mngani, welcome back to Zulu Lessons with Thando, the place for modern conversational Zulu language lessons. I would like us to look at object concords. But as we do so, we are going to do a little bit of a review of other things that you've learned a while ago now. We are doing that because I would like you to connect these two things that you've learned with this lesson. So let's start with using a pronoun or a subject concord. For a pronoun, you would say, an example, Uthandeka ubhala incwadi. Uthandeka ubhala incwadi. Uthandeka ubhala incwadi. So simply, Thandeka is writing a book. Now, if we are now continuing on this conversation of ours about Thandeka and her writing of this book, we will now drop Thandeka and replace her with she, because we already know that we are talking about Thandeka. Now, we can then replace the name Thandeka with she, which is u. So, ubhala incwadi yesiZulu. Ubhala incwadi yesiZulu. Ubhala incwadi yesiZulu. She's writing an isiZulu book. Or we can also say she's writing a book that is in isiZulu. We now see we are no longer mentioning her name. We are mentioning her with using a pronoun, and the pronoun is he or she. It's u. But of course, in this case, we know that we're talking about Thandeka, and that is a female person. And so we say she when we translate it into English. The second thing that I would like us to review is using consonant vowel sounds. So the Y sound, y, and the W sound, w. So think about negative sentences like the present tense negative or the future tense negative, whatever it may be. So let's think about that. We'll use the present tense. The example is uthanda ibhola. Uthanda ibhola. You like soccer. You can also say you like football. Also keeping in mind that ibhola is a ball. However, in South Africa, if you say ibhola, then you're just simply talking about soccer itself, the game, the sport. Now, the negative of uthanda ibhola is then awuthandi ibhola. Awuthandi ibhola. You don't like soccer. You don't like football. We are saying w there because we know that a negative statement starts with the letter A. And we then have an A and a U following each other. And so since the letter is, or the pronoun is u, we know that we must separate those two vowels using a W. So that W actually is a vowel sound that we are using as a consonant. So the consonant Y works as a vowel sound. Then we can have this other example. Ingane ithanda ibhola. Ingane ithanda ibhola. Ingane, the child, likes soccer or football. So we've changed our subject now. Our subject of the sentence is now ingane. And ingane is a class 5 noun. So meaning that its subject concord is I, as you can see there on the verb thanda. Just before the verb thanda, we have an I. So that is the subject concord, or you could say the pronoun for ingane. Now, when we now negate this sentence, we want to say then, ingane ayithandi ibhola. Ingane ayithandi ibhola. Ingane ayithandi ibhola. The child does not like football or soccer. We are using that Y between the A and the I in this negative statement to separate those two vowels, because the Y is the vowel, the consonant vowel sound that goes with the vowel I. So the Y sound, the Y, is the one that we always use that accompanies the I. So the letter W always accompanies the U. When we have two vowels next to each other before a verb. The same with the letter Y. It always accompanies the E, the I, just before the verb. Keep a mental note of that as we move on now to object concords. An object concord represents the object in a sentence. In the previous sentence that we were talking about Ebola, soccer or football. That is the object. The subject of the sentence was ingane, the child. So now we are saying the object concord represents the object itself in a sentence in the same way that a pronoun represents a noun. So looking at our example about Thandeka, the first example we had in this lesson, that she's writing a book. The object of the sentence is the book, incwadi. Incwadi is a class 5 noun. And so its subject concord is I, the letter I. The object will show just before the verb and after any article, whether that article is an article that shows a tense, for example, ya for the present tense and zo for the future tense, or the conditional article such as nga, for example, say maybe if you're saying could or would. So our sentence then would look like this. She's writing a book, right? She is u. We know that. And then writing, of course, is to write is bala. And we know that she's writing it. It what? The book. So she's writing it. Now, this it has to be represented in this phrase. So we then have this I, because it is incwadi and it is a class 5 noun, which means that the concord for it is the letter I. So if you look there, you can now see there is a letter I before the verb bala. However, the whole verb, the whole phrase on its own doesn't make sense because we have two vowels next to each other, which is something we never ever do in isiZulu. So how are we going to separate these two vowels? We are going to separate them with the consonant vowel sound Y. So uyayibhala, uyayibhala, uyayibhala. She's writing it. You can also, for emphasis, say the actual object again, the actual noun of the object. So you can also say, she is writing it. So she's writing it incwadi. So uyayibhala incwadi. This sounds funny in English because it's like I'm saying she's writing it, the book. I used to have a lecturer who taught us cost management accounting. So this guy, he used to say, calculate it, the contingencies. And I'm sitting there thinking like, wait, but why do you keep saying it, the contingencies? Then one day it dawned, no, man. He is saying this thing in isiZulu in his mind. He's saying it in isiZulu and translating it into English. And so that is why he is saying it, the contingencies. So he's saying, wabale, ama contingencies, you know. So you wouldn't actually now use the pronoun of this thing and then say the actual thing again, the noun of it in English, but in isiZulu, we do. So it will sound funny, but you'll get used to it. Just practice it some more. So uyayibhala, she's writing it, but we can also say uyayibhala incwadi, which we will not translate it literally like that. We'll just say she is writing the book. Now, at this point, I'm assuming you would also connect with the previous revision we've just had, because the vowel before the verb is an I. This should be accompanied by a Y, right? So uyayibhala. The it here is represented by y, that yi. Let's use other nouns as objects of a sentence. So the structure of the sentence will then look like this. It will be your pronoun, followed by your tense article if you have one, so maybe the ya or the zo. And then you have the object concord itself, and then the verb. So that will be your sentence structure as we work with these. So below are some examples of personal object concords. So, you know, when we talk about personal pronouns and we're saying I, you, he or she, they, you all, we, that kind of thing. So those are the personal object concords that we're just going to look at right now. And then we will look at all the object concords for all the classes of nouns, singular and plural. So the ones for the personal object concords will make absolutely no sense to what you've learned in the past. So my suggestion is to just simply memorize them. I'm being honest with you. You will not connect them with anything. So memorize them. Now, the first one is myself. When you are talking about yourself as in oneself and saying, for example, I love myself, that is reflexive. You are talking about yourself, so one's own self. So that is z, z, z. Don't pull that Z-I or that Z-I. Don't say Z, say Z. Make it a short vowel sound. So now when you are now saying this, you are saying, you're talking about yourself. So you will still, if you are saying, I love myself, so ngiyazithanda, you are still going to say I, which is ngi. Of course, this is the present tense, and so we have that article ya. And then we follow with the object concord, this thing or this person that you're loving, and you're saying you're loving yourself. So that is that thing we're talking about. So you then put that in there now, which is z. And then lastly, your verb, which in this case is thanda, to love. So here you're saying, I love myself. Ngiyazithanda. Just make sure you keep this in mind, that you're not using ngi for myself. Ngi here is I. That z is reflexive. It's talking about one's own self. Then we have ngi. Ngi is me. So if we are talking about someone else, right, and we are saying, he loves me or you love me, right? So then we would first start with that person we are talking about and say you, so u, and then uya ngi thanda. Do you hear that ngi before the verb? That ngi is talking about me. I am the object of the sentence, me, Thando. You are the one who is loving me. So me is represented by ngi in this phrase. And of course, ngi is then before the verb. So we are starting again, we are starting with the pronoun, followed by the present tense article, followed by the object concord. So the thing that we are talking about, that is the object of the sentence. And then lastly, the verb. So, uyangithanda, you love me. Think about this. If you wanted to say this way, say I wanted to say, Thabani loves me. Thabani loves me. I would then say, uyangithanda uThabani. The next one is you. You is ku, ku, ku. That K-U sound, the K sound. So note here what I said to you. Remember I said it makes absolutely no sense because if you are trying to connect it with other things that we have learned, where does the K come from? That's what I'm saying. So KU is you. Simply memorize it. This is what it is, period. So if now I am saying, I love you. I, of course, you know that personal pronoun is ngi. And of course, this is a present tense sentence. So yeah, I'm talking about you. So I'm then going to say ku. And then lastly, the verb thanda. So ngiyakuthanda, I love you. Look at me, I'm pointing now and I'm saying, I love you. Think about it. If I am now saying it in isiZulu, ngiyakuthanda. Do you see that ku, that you, is just before the verb. That's you who I'm loving here. Let us now say, I love him or I love her. So he or she. That him or that her is represented by mu, 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 mu. Don't pull the sound and make the cow sound mu. No. And also, this is Zulu. The cow sound is mo, not mu. Just that I'd say that. But anyway, so don't pull the sound. It's a short vowel sound, mu. So using the very same thing, same tense that we've used already to I loving whoever. So now I am saying I love him. Ngiyamuthanda. 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 That mu is right before the verb. Ngiyamuthanda. Now, the next few are going to be the simplest because they are the same as what you already know. So, they is ba. So, I love them. It's ngiyabathanda. 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 I love them. And of course, this ba or they is for nouns that start with aba and nouns that start with o. So for example, ogogo, grandmothers, omkhulu, grandfathers, abantu, people, abangani, friends. And then we move on to the object concord for the plural and formal you. So in a slang way, we could say you all or y'all. So that one is ni. That's the object concord, ni. So when I am saying I love you all, I will then say ngiyanithanda, ngiyanithanda, ngiyanithanda. I love you all. Now, Someone used to say this a lot on TV in the news in isiXhosa was umama unoxolo grotbom. She would say, she would always say this at the end of the news bulletin. She would say, Ndinithanda nonke emakhaya. I love all of you at home. So of course she's saying it in isiXhosa, so the I or ngi is actually ndi, N-D-I instead of N-G-I. So anyway, that's an aside. Now we move on to we. We or us is the same as the personal pronoun itself that you already know, which is si. Si. Not see as into see, but si. Now, when we say, I love us, so I would then say, ngiyasithanda. I love us. Ngiyasithanda. Ngiyasithanda. The si always after the article that you are using, whether it's a tense one or a conditional one, and right before the verb. Ngiyasithanda. Then we have, lastly, for the personal object concords, we have they, but this they is z, because it's for all the nouns that begin with in and im. When they are plural, they are izin or izin and izim or izim. So like, for example, izingane, izintombi, izindlovu, izimbali, izimvu, all of those words. When we say they, so plural, they, we then say z as their personal pronoun and their object concord. So if I now want to say, I love the children, or I love children, children being izingane, then we are saying, ngiyazithanda, ngiyazithanda, ngiyazithanda. That z represents the children. That's the object in the sentence. Even if I wanted to say, I love flowers, right? Izimbali. Ngiyazithanda. Ngiyazithanda izimbali. I love flowers.